Chapter 4, which is Transcendental Knowledge, text number 33. Shreyan dravyamaya yajna jnana yajna param tapa sarvam karma akilam partha jnane parisamayapete. Shreyan dravyamaya yajna jnana yajna param tapa sarvam karma akilam partha jnane parisamapayate. Shreyan dravyamaya yajna jnana yajna param tapa sarvam karma akilam partha jnane parisamapayate. Shreyan dravyamaya yajna jnana yajna parantapa sarva karma akilam partha jnane parisamapayate. Shreyan dravyamaya yajna jnana yajna parantapa sarvam karma akilam partha jnane parisamayapate. Shreyan dravyamaya yajna jnana yajna param tapa sarvam karma akilam partha jnane parisamayapate. Anybody else? Or Shreyan, greater, dravyamaya, of material possessions, yajna, than the sacrifice, jnana yajna, sacrifice and knowledge, param tapa, O chastiser of the enemy, sarvam, all, karma, activities, akilam, in totality, partha, O son of Pritha, jnane, in knowledge, parisamayapate, end. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Partha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, than to gain release from material miseries and ultimately, then to gain release from material miseries and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service. Nonetheless, transcendental service to the Supreme Lord Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice, and one should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. Once faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of knowledge, the sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter into the spiritual platform. Depending on the differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda, fruitive activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in the pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge. All right, I know knowledge is basically a word repeated quite often, and transcendental knowledge. Obviously, this chapter is all about transcendental knowledge. But before I get there, Bhagavad Gita basically explains 4 different types of yoga. So what is yoga? Yoga is to connect our consciousness to Krishna. So yoga is to connect our consciousness to God. For us, God, there is only one God, as we speak about often, it's Lord Sri Krishna. So there are 4 kinds of yoga, how we can connect our consciousness to Krishna. One is karma yoga, do your work which you are doing, but do not basically don't wait on the results. Don't expect result to be positive or negative. Just do your job and leave the rest to Krishna. You have the knowledge, which is in jnana yoga, which is all transcendental knowledge, right? The knowledge which you're talking about is jnana yagna. So that is, you connect your consciousness to Krishna through knowledge, which is the transcendental knowledge. Then you have dhyana yoga, which is through meditation. You focus and then basically try to remember Lord Krishna all the time. And then love, devotion, that's the bhakti yoga. Obviously, so we here are basically in the jnana yoga, which is knowledge. By knowledge, we are trying to basically connect our consciousness to Lord Sri Krishna. All right, so what is transcendental knowledge? So by Srila Prabhupada has explained transcendental knowledge as a spiritual knowledge that transcends the limitations of material perception, and understanding. It involves understanding one's true self, the soul, and its relationship with the Supreme Being, Krishna, and the material world. This knowledge is not merely academic, but must be related through devotional service and a process of self-realization. So before we get into the more details, so what is, self-realization, what is basically it? There is really a good book, it is The Science of Self-Realization by Srila Prabhupada. If you're going to basically start off with any books written and published by Srila Prabhupada and published by Bhaktivedanta books, you got to start with The Science of Self-Realization. So what is self-realization? Self-realization is nothing but your initial understanding that one's self, one's identity is a consciousness, which will help you connect to basically Lord Sri Krishna. So that is, self-realization. That is what we need to basically come to. How do you get there? By knowledge. So what is knowledge? Transcendental knowledge. So it's basically the spiritual knowledge. If we need to be successful in the material world, obviously we need the material knowledge, right? We learn maths, science, history, civics, all these different kinds of classes. Why? To become successful in the material world. So without the knowledge, you cannot be successful. Similarly, in the spiritual world too, or in our world, in devotional service, you need to have a little bit of knowledge as well. And that's the knowledge which you need to basically get to start your devotional service. You can do a lot of connection to Krishna consciously through karma yoga, but ultimately you got to end up in jnana yoga. So transcendental knowledge, I've defined it as defined by Srila Prabhupada. But what is it all about? So Srila Prabhupada talks about beyond material knowledge. So what is that? So we have our 5 senses. We can touch, we can smell, we can see, we can taste. But our material knowledge is all based on whatever we see. If somebody says something, we need somebody to prove it. We need to see it. If we say something feels soft, somebody says, "Oh, this cloth feels really soft," we need to actually feel it to confirm that it is soft, right? If somebody says the food tastes really good, made by Prem Sagar Prabhu today, you need to really taste it to confirm it. Right, so all that is basically our material knowledge, right? Because it's all based on sense perception. All right, and the one challenge is it is also limited by sense imperfections. What feels soft to you might not really feel soft to me. What feels tasteful to you might really not be tasteful to me. What you see as beautiful might not really be beautiful to me, because what you see and what I see are different. What you taste and I taste are different. What you feel and I feel are different. So those are the imperfections. So you don't have any of those imperfections when it comes to spiritual knowledge, right? And that is basically what the transcendental knowledge is all about. It is basically understanding the truths that are beyond our senses, that are beyond ordinary perceptions. All right, when we offer the bhog to Lord Sri Krishna, it is explained by Prabhupada, he can use his nose to eat, he can use his eyes to eat, he can use his mouth to eat. But that is basically, going above our ordinary perception of Krishna taking the bhog when offered to him. All right, so that is transcendental knowledge. It is something above our perceptions, all right, beyond our ordinary perceptions. So understanding the self, once again realizing, one's true identity, as a spiritual soul, right? Spiritual being soul, distinct from the material body. We always talk about it. So, the soul, we are the soul. We don't consider ourselves as material body. So you want to get into learning, you want to get into knowledge. You want to learn knowledge, one of the first steps is understanding this. We are not this body. It's not I, right? We always refer to I, me, mine. So if you have attended any classes by anybody sitting here instead of me, or in any of Iskcon classes, that is one of the main things they talk about. It is, I am the soul, I am not this body. All right, body can basically perish, soul never perishes. We need to basically understand that self. Relationship with God. Understanding one's relationship with God, who's the supreme source and source of all existence. Without that understanding, it's really difficult to connect our consciousness. It doesn't matter which kind of the 4 yogas you basically apply to yourself. All right, that is one of the most critical aspects of gaining knowledge. All right, understanding. And the relationship is one of eternal service. All right, so that is basic. So all these karma yoga, dhyana yoga, or jnana yoga, ultimately they all should lead to bhakti yoga, so devotion with love. All right, so that is basically the relationship with God, a realization through devotion. Obviously, so we cannot speculate and gain transcendental knowledge. All right, so it's basically, we call about, Prahlad Maharaj is basically Shravanam Kirtanam. So you hear, people in the disciplic succession talk about Gita, talk about Srimad Bhagavatam, talk about Chaitanya Charitamrita, talk about the various scriptures. So you got to listen, okay? You got to devote yourself to listening carefully, understanding it. So that is basically how you realize knowledge, you gain knowledge, is basically through devotion. So the other thing we need to understand is liberation from material bondage, right? So if you gain knowledge, as I said, basically the end goal is bhakti yoga. So you gain knowledge, it leads you in a better stage of bhakti yoga. So ultimately, you need to learn you need to be liberated from this material bondage. That's the ultimate goal. One can break free from the cycle of birth and death and achieve liberation from material bondage if we gain knowledge. And then 3 stages of realization. So, these are stuff which you learn, these are the things which you learn once you gain knowledge. And 3 stages of realization of the localized aspect of God, Paramatma, right? It resides inside of you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, Lord Sri Krishna, and the realizations of one's own spiritual identity, where you stay, where you belong. Right? And so how do you basically how do you basically gain knowledge? How to get there? I've told you what happens when you actually gain the knowledge, but how do you basically get there? That's the key. These are not in any specific order. It's not saying like follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are all explained by Srila Prabhupada. Jnana yajna, so sacrifice of knowledge. So what are you really sacrificing? We're not trying to basically sacrifice any spiritual knowledge. What we are trying to sacrifice is basically our ignorance, the negative tendency, and most importantly, our ego, right, into the fire of Vedantic wisdom. So, that's basically is the key. That is what we are trying to sacrifice. All right. So ignorance, our negative tendencies, and our ego. Right? So that is key. Yeah, I would actually say that's probably one of the first steps before you want to really gain knowledge or really start understanding what this is all about. This will lead basically to the development of intellect and ultimately will help one acquire spiritual knowledge, right? Because if you have an ego, nothing is going to move forward. You can chant 16 rounds, but if you carry your ego with you all the times, it's not going to help. So you've got to sacrifice that first before you basically move on. Can you do it 100%? It is difficult. We are born with it, we die with it. But how do you control it? That's really the key. A lot of people give charity, right? You give charity, they say, oh, this person is good, he gives a lot of charity, he goes to heaven. Probably true. That's the material, activity. If you do charity without ego, help a lot of people in need throughout your life, then yeah, you might end up, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita too, yes, you could end up in the heaven. Not in Golok Vrindavan, in heaven. So heaven is also a Mrityu Lok. So ultimately you're going to come back. So as soon as your good credits expire, you're going to come back. So our goal is to basically go to Golok Vrindavan where we don't have to come back, right? In spiritual knowledge, the charity will be in the mode of goodness, all right, Sataguna. But it will keep them bound. It will keep you bound in the material existence only, so you will not get past it. So that is the important, you got to think about it. Importance of disciplic succession. So why does Prabhupada talk about disciplic succession? So when you I talked about hearing the Vedantic text, or hearing Bhagavad Gita, hearing about Srimad Bhagavatam, what is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. So you need to basically hear it from a really good guru. All right. So if you're able to get initiated, so then your guru can help you out. If not, you've got to really listen all this from authorized figures. There is a lot of people who talk, really well, but are they in basically the disciplic succession? Are they really giving what is supposed to be said, what is supposed to be given? All right. A lot of people talk nice to get you attracted. Nowadays, if you go on YouTube, you get a lot of views, you get paid. All right. Anybody in the Iskcon world, if they preach, they get money, it comes back into the Iskcon world. It doesn't go out. Take Srila Prabhupada as a great example. So I'm not saying basically just listen to people from Iskcon, but make sure that what message they're passing, what teachings they're giving is authentic. So that will become your roadblock if it is not authentic. And that is why Srila Prabhupada calls it Bhagavad Gita as it is, because there's no mixture in it, right? It's exactly what Krishna said. And when you're reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, which are translated by Srila Prabhupada, just don't read the translation, read the purport. You get more out of the purport than you get from the translation. All right. So that is important. So that is the importance of disciplic succession. The message is coming unvarnished, right from Krishna down. So that is really important. So you need to make sure you're hearing it from the right source. All right. Faith and devotion. Yeah. Without this, you cannot gain any kind of a knowledge. All right. Even material, right? Faith in the process. All right. So, you have a process to basically go through to achieve this knowledge. So you need to have a faith in the process. You're not going to read Gita once and understand everything. You're not going to hear a verse once, even this verse. You're not going to hear it once and grasp the full meaning of it. Okay. Not that easy, right? Because devotion takes some time, and the faith in the process. You need to give faith in the process. Do it repeatedly. Try to understand. Read the purports. Try to understand. Have the faith in the whole process, and obviously devotion. You need to have devotion to Lord Sri Krishna, so that He can help you out in this whole process. That is the bottom line. So have faith and devotions. Purifying consciousness. All right. So what is this all about? Right. So if you're going to read all these books, Srila Prabhupada's books, Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada's translated books, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, any other text. All right. So you need to have a pure consciousness. So what is pure consciousness? All right. So if you read this, it basically helps you, makes your consciousness pure. Okay, so hopefully it'll help you clear out your egos, or at least control your ego, control your temptations, all right? Be a much more disciplined devotee, all right? So that is basically how these books and these teachings help purify your consciousness. The divine qualities, cultivation of divine qualities, all right? So true transcendental knowledge is not just an intellectual understanding, right? It is not just reading verses and memorizing them. People can do it, but do you really understand what it's all about? So that's sort of the true transcendental knowledge is not just an intellectual understanding, but also manifest in the cultivation of divine qualities. Okay, like cleanliness, forgiveness, okay, compassion and love for all living beings. Okay, you need to be compassionate. You need to be clean, and you should not basically hold grudges. That's basically forgive people. So those basically are divine qualities. You need those divine qualities if you're going to gain the knowledge, right? This is transcendental knowledge. This is spiritual. This is not material, okay? You don't have to follow any of this to gain material knowledge. You need to read, you need to listen to your teachers, you need to read books, and you need to score well in your exam. There is no exam here where you write and score marks, right? The only person who is observing you, if you're initiated, is your guru. If not, then Krishna, right? He's observing you. He knows what you're doing and what you're not doing. So there are no exams in spiritual knowledge, all right, gaining spiritual knowledge. But, you've got to do it. As I said, with faith and devotion, you got to basically cultivate divine qualities, okay? So sacrifice of knowledge, sacrifice your ego, sacrifice your ignorance, sacrifice your negative tendencies, okay? If you do all this stuff, your consciousness will be pretty good, and the knowledge basically will help your consciousness connect to Lord Sri Krishna. So that is our Jnana Yoga, right? That is really the first important step to basically get to Bhakti Yoga, which is the devotional service. I mean, ultimately, even in Gita, if Krishna basically says Bhakti Yoga is the best, that's the easiest. But to get there, you need some help. You need to cross some bridges, you need to cross some hurdles. So the knowledge helps you. If I tell you chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna, Mahamantra, you chant, but you don't really understand why you're chanting, what is the main purpose, all right? So that is where basically spiritual knowledge helps. So which is nothing but the transcendental knowledge, which is basically the gist of this chapter 4, right? And so I think that basically covers everything which I wanted to talk about. But, ultimately, with all this said and done, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he basically said that this is a thought I want to leave with you. If you can repeat after me. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalau nasti eva eva gathar anyatha. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalau nasti eva eva gathir anyatha. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalau nasti eva eva gathir anyatha. So in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy names of the Lord. There is no other way. There is no other way. There is no other way. But you need to chant the name of the Lord, which is what is our Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, right? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But to get there, you need help, all right? And transcendental knowledge is one step which can get you basically closer, and not just chanting, but understanding the overall supremacy of Lord Sri Krishna. Srimad Bhagavat Gita ki jai. If there are any comments or questions, I can take it. Otherwise, we'll go for Kirtan.
When you said there's no test, but the test is the once person's development of the qualities
right
on the path of starting transcendental knowledge. And that's what certifies that that person is on true path or not. And that the qualities of Vaishnava that was described, compassionate, that's what 57 number. I guess I'm not.
No, you're right. No, I basically just compare it, right? Because we are all so used to our material life. Most of us, probably all of us, are well educated in something or the other. We all hold jobs. If not, we are retired after holding jobs from 35 years plus. We are always evaluated in some fashion of the right from kindergarten. You're evaluated. Okay, your parents push you hard, study hard, study hard. If you don't, they help you with tutors, all right, to help you basically, get through your exams. And then you're graded. Every year you're graded. You're graded from kindergarten, you're graded for life, as long as you work. You need to get promotion, you're graded. You need to get a raise, you're graded. So you're graded. Somebody is physically grading you. You can actually see your grade. But how do you see your grade in Bhakti Yoga or in gaining transcendental knowledge? That is why basically, I went through those. These are all Prabhupada's, not mine, obviously. These are all Prabhupada's way of basically getting to transcendental knowledge. So you can self-evaluate and say, yes, I'm doing all this stuff. But are you really? That's basically the key. But these are the steps which you need to do. It's great if when you come here, participate in congregational activities, your bhakti increases. So you can learn from other people too. And then the other people are going to probably also see you and tell you, hopefully, the things you're doing right, the things you can improve on. So that's where I was talking about the evaluation. So nobody is sitting and grading you. If you take a Bhakti Shastri class, you do get graded on your knowledge. But that's basically of a knowledge of understanding, right? But once again, it doesn't gain you the transcendental knowledge. They're grading you on the knowledge of what you understood. Are you really applying it to your life? Is it helping you in devotional service? So that's really the question. So, there is no exam for it. The final result, you only know a final result. If you don't end up in Golok Vrindavan, then you failed. So that's the ultimate. But anyway, all right. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Vidhapati.